to the Elections Conference Committee. Senators, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you for being here at 8 a.m. Really appreciate that. All right, is Revisor Heim or Revisor Long online to walk us through some of the changes? We do have a list that Revisor Long has passed out for House Bill 2332 and Senate substitute for 2183. So if Revisor Long would like to go ahead and discuss the document that he handed out to us. If he's in his office. He might not be back in his office yet.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Revisor Heim.
I can run through the bills and the changes here until Jason gets online here. So.
Okay, sir. Proceed. Thank you.
If you look at House Bill 2332, it left the House as an amendment to 251122 prohibiting out-of-state requiring certain information for those that were soliciting you to fill out an advance ballot, and made it a Class C misdemeanor if you didn't have the information on the envelopes and so on, and provided that the Attorney General could bring a lawsuit, and there'd be a civil penalty of $20 each for each violation. That's how it left the House. The Senate added House Bill 2183, which is the bill that passed the House. It said the governor could not change election laws, nor the executive branch, nor the judicial branch, and so on. They also added House Bill 2339, which expanded the crime of election tampering. That was Representative Topeka's bill. And they added, and then the base bill was 2332. So anyway, that's the first bill. So the Senate added in 2183 and 2339 into this bill and made some other changes. You want me to run through the substitute for 2183, and then Jason can go through his explainer, his chart, if you would like.
Yes, we will go ahead and do that. So if you could go ahead and do 2183, and then we'll have Revisor Long go through his explainer. Thank you.
Senate substitute for House Bill 2183. Actually, they gutted the provisions of 2183 because they had put those in House Bill 2332. So this is typical kind of a end of the session kind of moves in terms of changes in bills. But what they did in addition to deleting 2183, they added Senate Bill 293, which the House Committee had a hearing on. That was the transparency in revenues provision where no election official shall accept or spend money or anything of value unless it's appropriated. They added Senate Bill 292, which dealt with the delivery of advanced voting ballots unless the person submits a written statement accompanying the ballot at the time of the ballot delivery, and so on. And it limits the sworn statement that they did not undue influence, and also limited the delivery to 5 advance ballots and so forth. The committee also had House committee had a kind of informational hearing on that bill. They added Senate Bill 11, which dealt with an amendment to 25-11-28. It provides that you cannot knowingly backdate or otherwise alter a postmark on a advanced ballot, so on, that's returned. And they added Senate Bill 35, which basically deleted the provision that the Secretary of State could provide additional time beyond the 3 days after the date of the voting to count advanced ballots in their return. And they believe added provisions of House Bill 2319. This was a bill that in no case can an elected or appointed official or a court challenge the deadline of 5 p.m. On the date of the. Anyway, I believe those are the bills that were added. There was, you got questions anyway. Jason's got the chart that goes through by issue, so he can.
Thank you, Revisor Heim.
Yes.
Revisor Long, if you could go through your list that you have given to us, that'd be awesome.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've provided the conference committee a chart that organizes the substantive provisions of House Bill 2332 and Senate substitute for House Bill 2183 by the policy that's being proposed in the bills. I simply did this because of the rearrangement of those policy issues by the work of the Senate committee into the different bills. I thought it might be helpful for the committee to see the issues on a side-by-side like this, comparing the House position for that particular policy issue with the Senate position as it came out of the Senate. And so, for example, on page 1, you see the first issue is that prohibition on modification of election laws. You see the House position as it came out of House Bill 2183, and then you can compare that with the Senate position on that same policy as it came out in House Bill 2332. I don't know if you want me to actually go into detail on these particular policy issues, since Mike just ran through the provisions of both bills. But I did try and organize these in this manner so the committee could see the two positions on each substantive policy. Where you end up wanting to place them in either bill, obviously it's up to the conference committee to decide, but you can decide on what form that policy would take through this comparison. And so you can see on the next item on page 1 is the Transparency and Revenues Underwriting and Elections Act, which was not included in any House bill, but was included by the Senate in House Bill 2183. And then the next section of the chart gets into provisions that pertain specifically to advanced voting ballots. You can see there were amendments regarding restrictions on mailing applications for advanced voting ballots. And you can compare those two provisions from the House position in 2332 versus how it was amended in the Senate in that same bill. Moving on to page 3 of the chart, there are prohibitions on what is known as ballot harvesting, or delivering multiple ballots for other voters to the county election office. This was not passed in any House bill, but it was heard in House Bill 2054. In that form, the Senate did pass it in House Bill 2183. And you can also see in each of these boxes, I have included a reference to the bill and the section numbers within that bill. if you want to go and look at the specific provisions that each of the chambers considered. The next one in the middle row on page 3 prohibits candidates from assisting with advanced voting ballots. And so you can see the two provisions. The House heard and looked at that in House Bill 2333, which did not pass the House. The Senate amended the bulk of that provision into House Bill 2183. And then finally on page 3, there is striking the Secretary of State's authority to extend the deadline for receipt of advanced voting ballots. Again, that is a similar provision in both House Bill 2319 that didn't pass the House, but was picked up and included in House Bill 2183. Page 4 at the top, there is a prohibition on altering the postmark date on advanced voting ballots. That was a measure added by the Senate in the 2183 when not heard in any House bill. I believe there may have been an informational hearing on the House side. And then the signature match requirement was also a provision added by the Senate in House Bill 2183. Then there were a couple of provisions dealing with election crimes there at the bottom of page 4. The Senate included in a floor amendment the false representation of an election official into House Bill 2183. And then the two crimes that were originated in House bills, expanding the crime of electioneering was in House Bill 2333. The Senate picked up that provision and added it to House Bill 2183. And expanding the crime of election tampering, which was in House Bill 2339. And the Senate took that, made a slight change to it and put it into House Bill 2332. Finally, the Senate added a couple of provisions on the last page, page 6, regarding duties of the Secretary of State. The first is in respect to publishing total numbers of registered voters, that data on the Secretary of State's website. And then maintenance of residential and mailing addresses of registered voters. There were some specific requirements proposed for the Secretary of State's office in House Bill 2332. Be happy to answer any questions we might have about the chart or any of the provisions.
Revisers, for your summary of the legislation. Conference committee, are there any questions for the reviser at this time? Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Jason, if you could just clarify again the number of bills that are in House Bill 2332.
The bills that the Senate committee added to House Bill 2332. I believe they put in the contents of House Bill 2183, and they had the contents of Senate Bill 292 and 293, I believe, went into that. And then I believe House Bill 2339 also went into that bill. I think those are the 4 bills that went into House Bill 2332. And then in addition to that, there were some provisions amended onto that bill in committee and I believe on the floor as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then Jason, if I could ask, so the last provision, well, at the top of page 6 that you just mentioned, so the piece in section 2, the Secretary of State already does this, already files and maintains that separate residency and mailing addresses. So what the measure that we're looking at now, what is the difference relating to the database? What's the difference that we're wanting this legislation to do, and we're already doing that?
Thank you
to a certain degree.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Jason, I do have somebody from the Secretary of State's office, if you'd prefer to defer to them.
Yes, that would be fine, Mr. Chairman, because they can probably answer that question better than I can.
Thank you, Revisor. The chair now recognizes Katie Kapal, who is the Can you provide your title, please? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Copal, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Communications and Policy. The system is currently able to handle both the mailing address and the residential address. It's something we're happy to do. It's just a matter of voters following the directions. We will note that if there is the requirement to do both, it could take some time to communicate those changes to election or to the voters. We're happy to do it. We're happy to do anything you tell us to do. But that could cause, at least temporarily, some data entry errors as we adjust to the change.
One last question on this issue, Mr. Chairman. So if Katie could also address, would it cost any additional monies to do that?
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Copal.
Mr. Chairman, we don't believe so, as the registration form already requests that information, and again, the system is able to do it. So it's just a matter of policy for you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I also would like to direct the conference committee's attention to the implementation date. As of right now, it's January 1st, 2022 for House Bill 2332. So there is a little bit of a delayed start to this bill if it goes into effect, and if we keep that date where it's at. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on the senator's questions relative to this new requirement. I guess I would direct it to the senators. What is the purpose of this new language? How is it not duplicitous of what's already required by the Secretary of State?
Thank you for the question. This was added by amendment on the floor, and the purpose of this, in my understanding, is to identify the number of voters at the time of election start. As you say, they're required on a 20-day prior to the election, publish the number of total voters, registered voters voting in each precinct, and a number affiliated in each party.
I think we're looking at different sections. I'm looking on, of the bill, I'm looking on page 2, new section 2, that requires the Secretary of State to record and maintain a residential address and a mailing address for each registered voter. And then it talks about post office boxes and such. And as I understand the information that was just given from the Secretary of State, they already do that.
They already do that.
But this is a new section, and my question is, what does this add to the process, and what is the purpose?
I think it just justified what they're already doing. There was a question about that came up on post office box during debate, whether you be a post office box could be your residency, and this clarified that your post office box could not be your resident location.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Miller, I believe the intent of the person that offered that amendment was if someone went to or called the Secretary of State's office for a list or went to their county clerk's office for a list of voters, sometimes that information wasn't in that list, and that was the purpose of that amendment, if my memory serves me correctly. Although the Secretary of State has that information, sometimes it's not extrapolated down to the county clerk's offices or they're given.
Actually, what I suspected was intended to address is an issue that I've raised of people using not a residential address, but either a post office box, or in the case of many cases we had here in Shawnee County, they were using a UPS box that was a little too tiny for them to live in. So I suspect that's, looking at the language in new section 2, that was the attempt, was to address that. I'm not sure it does that because it's tied to the Secretary of State's office as opposed to where you're registering. So I see it as a problem that needs to be identified. Well, actually, all it has to be done is it has to be prosecuted, and currently it's not being prosecuted here in the county. But do we know, could I ask who the senator was that offered this amendment? Perhaps I could confer with them.
Senator Tyson.
I know her. I'll speak to her. Thank you.
All All right, are there any further questions for the revisor or the Secretary of State's office at this current point in time on either 2332 or 2183? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you, revisors, and thank you to the Secretary of State's office. We are going to go ahead and open up 2332 first. And I do have an amendment for this proposal, but my question will go to the revisors. So Revisor Long or Heim, it's been indicated that there are 4 proposals inside 2332 already. Does that mean that we can no longer add any bills to that proposal? Or is it that I can add additional bills to that proposal because that's all baked into one?
I believe you can add, because this is considered a bill now, so it's not, it's 4 bills in one, so now you've got 1 bill, so you can add 3 more if you want.
Thank you, Revisor. That's what I was thinking, and I just wanted to make sure that that was the case. So, Conference Committee, I would like to propose that we bring House Bill 2090, which passed the House 125 to 0, into House Bill 2332. This is concerning an update to Kansas law from 1941, and it adds additional military branches. So right now, the only branches that are recognized for military elected officials are the Army, Navy, and Marines. At that point in time, there was no Air Force, no Space Force, what have you. And this basically makes it to where if you are in the military, you get orders, you go on those orders, you can have a temporary replacement in your office that fills that position for you. And if you guys would like to discuss that with yourselves, and I am just proposing the base bill of 2090. Senator Alley.
Chairman, if my understanding is right, this bill was amended in the House, is that correct?
I believe, revisors, was this bill amended in the House?
Yes, there were committee amendments.
Okay, so my proposal is to pass it as the House passed it when it left our chamber. The Senate did add some amendments to it on your side. However, the contents of those amendments have not passed either chamber, but the base bill of 2090 as it left the House is what I'm proposing.
Chairman, if we could just step out for just a moment,
Yes, sir.
and then we'll just do that and be right back.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate will accept the position on putting in House Bill 2090 as it passed the House back into this bill.
Okay, fantastic. I think we're all in agreement on that. So the revisor, do you have that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Are there any other proposals for 2332 that anybody would like to offer at this time? I think Representative Miller was wanting to raise his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to clean up this one section that was discussed earlier. Just rolling around in my head, I think it can be easily done to simply say that every election official shall require in accepting any registration form both a residential address and a residential address that is exclusive of any post office box or mailing address, so that it's clear that if you have your mail going one place, that's not acceptable as a registered address. So I think the revisor could work on that, but I think I understand the intent of the amendment or the section. I don't think it actually achieves what was intended at this point. It's actually the local election official that's accepting the registration that might be incomplete and be missing a true residential address.
If I could ask.
Senator Alley.
Thank you. If I could ask Katie, if I remember the debate and the conversation, wasn't it that sometimes those are not filled out when they turn in their application?
Mr. Chairman, this is Katie Copel for those who are listening online. I've called in a lifeline just to make sure. I don't want to tell you incorrectly. My understanding is, and I hope they buzz back in here very quickly, my understanding is if their residential address is separate than their mailing address, then yes, they do have to include both. I will note the amendment, there was an amendment prepared for in the Senate if they were to debate this particular provision that would say the residential address of a registered voter shall correspond to a physical location where the registered voter resides and shall not be a post office box or other address that does not correspond to a physical location that can be occupied. And our office felt that clarified the issue, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Also, during our debate on the floor, they talked about homeless shelters. The homeless shelter would be classified as their physical address. They could receive their mail at a post office box, but the physical address had to be where they spend the night, and it could be in a car actually parked at a location. That was a lot of discussion on that also. So if the revisor, and I take your suggestion, if the revisor could clean that language up, we would be favorable looking into it.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just reflecting back to the debate, and this would be a request for Katie, something that was brought up by our Senate minority leader was to make sure that someone in a domestic violence situation, that address would not be exposed. So anything that we do, can we just make sure that is clearly defined and not accidentally exposed?
Representative Miller.
That's similar to the point I was just going to raise. This language that relates to registrations at the Secretary of State's office or information at the Secretary of State's office is for that purpose, not just for victims of crime, but also judges and people in law enforcement that need some cover from those discovering their actual residences. So that's the purpose of this language that's already in statute, and I don't want to tread on that regardless of what we do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kapal.
Mr. Chairman, participants of the Address Confidentiality Program or the Safe at Home program, their information is never released publicly. Now, for voter registration numbers, they may be included in the total voter registration, but their actual contact information is protected from public information.
Okay, so revisers, did you receive Senator Alley's request?
Yes, and we can work with the Secretary of State's office on drafting a balloon for House Bill 2332 to revise that Section 2 based on Senator Miller or Representative Miller's proposed new language.
Either or, he's been both.
I know.
All right. Is there any further discussion on 2332 at this time? Senator Fausto.
Well, Mr. Chairman, so if I could ask that Jason send us another email with the bills that are in House Bill 2332, and just, I need to know, is the piece still in here that relates to how many advance ballots one could pick up?
That is on House Bill 2183. Is there further discussion on 2332 at this time? Seeing none, revisers, we will look for your proposed balloon amendment when we come back on 2332. We will now shift gears over to 2183. For 2183, what is the discussion of the conference committee? I guess I will go ahead and kick it off then. So in this bill, we do have what is referred to as ballot harvesting. And on, looking for the specific number of the ballots that one can carry. As of right now, it's listed as 5. I believe that is on page 3. Is that what I just heard? Yep. I don't think that's, what line number? Oh, okay. Jason, do you know where that's located at in 2183?
It's on page 2, Mr. Chairman, lines 25 and 26.
Okay, thank you. I see it. So I'm going to propose that we increase the amount from 5 to 10, doubling the amount of ballots that one can return so that they can help their neighbors, church members, so on and so forth. So that is my proposal to the Senate at this time. If you guys would like, you can discuss. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Senator. Recognizes Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems the Senate is getting more exercise than the House in this bill. The Senate has no objection to raising the number of ballots that can be turned in by a non-candidate from 5 to 10.
Okay, fantastic. Is there agreement on the House side? I think there is.
Sort of.
We will discuss the overall proposal here momentarily. I do have, I think, about 2 more changes for you guys that I'd like to propose at this time. On line 27, it's a violation of that section, which is a severity level 9 non-person felony. The proposal is to change that to a Class B misdemeanor instead. And then also, I believe that the reviser has a balloon amendment in regards to page 5 concerning folks who are disabled. And if the reviser would like to present that balloon at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I have that balloon ready. The request came to me late yesterday evening, but I can certainly describe the proposed amendment on page 5 if you would like me to.
If you could please describe it.
Yeah, so on page 5, in line 2, this is the provision that was added by the Senate requiring the county election officer to match the signature on the advanced voting ballot envelope with the signature that is on record with the county election office for that voter. There is an exception to that signature match if verification of the voter's signature shall, if the voter has a disability preventing the voter from signing the ballot. And the amendment would be, or if the voter's disability prevents the voter from signing in a way that would match the voter's signature that is on record with the county election office. So it would add an additional exception to that signature match requirement due to the voter's disability and being able to execute a signature that matches that signature that is on file for that voter.
Thank you, Reviser. This is basically if somebody has Parkinson's or something else like that, they can't duplicate their signature time and time again because of body movements or that kind of a deal. So that's why we're adding or that's why I'm attempting to add this or part on there for those folks. Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my backup's not here, Katie Capaldi.
I believe we have another individual on WebEx from the Secretary of State at this time, which is Clay Barker.
So my understanding, so if Clay will correct me if I am wrong, that there's already a mechanism for them to verify that signature if it does not match. The election official will call to verify that signature. So this would be repetitiveness and not really necessary.
Mr. Barker, would you like to give us your title and respond?
Sure. Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm down in Arizona right now, actually. I am Clay Barker, the Deputy General Counsel for the Secretary of State. And Senator Hildebrand is correct. Currently in statute, the county election officers must verify the signature on both an advanced ballot application and on the ballot envelope that's sent back. And the counties can decide how they want to do that process. It can be software, it can be individuals verifying it and then checking with others. But if the county election officer believes the signature does not match or that it was left blank mistakenly, the county election officer must attempt to contact the voter to cure the problem. And if it's cured, that's fine. If not, it becomes a provisional ballot and may not be counted. And during the period of the election, when the mail ballots are returned, the counties can create a list on the database called a provisional ballot detail report, which lists the status of every mail ballot that where there's a signature problem, and often activists, parties, candidates will attempt to call those people also to get them to cure their ballots.
Representative Berquist.
Yes, Mr. Barker, this is Representative Berquist. Just wanted to clarify the election office checking with that person to verify that that signature is correct or that mark is correct. Do they have to have that person come in and verify, or is it just simply to verify that the person actually sent a ballot in? Is it just to their own satisfaction, or how do they have to verify that?
Representative, that is left up to the county. It would depend on the circumstances. Obviously, if the signature is blank, the voter must come in and sign it. If the county's assured they're talking to the correct voter and the voter says, yes, that is my signature, that's good enough. And also, just for the committee's background information, every signature that voter has submitted over time on advanced ballot applications and motor vehicle signatures is compared to the ballot signature. It's not necessarily the one you signed on your original registration 20 years ago. Now, where the statute is silent is what effort the county must make in attempting to cure. It only says make an attempt to contact the voter. Our guidance is to attempt to make a person-to-person contact by phone. Some counties are known to actually go out to the voter's house, knock on the door, and ask whether that's actually their ballot or not.
Thank you, Mr. Barker.
Representative Miller.
Well, in addition to what Mr. Barker just said, I've actually provided sworn affidavits that I've retrieved the signature from the voter under a sworn affidavit and delivered that to the clerk, and that's been accepted. But I just want to make sure on this point, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like the revisor to affirm this, or Mr. Barker, that nothing in either this section or what you're proposing in your amendment overrides that other statute that we just discussed that allows processes for curing.
Jerry.
And if I may, and perhaps when we're drafting an amendment, it might be good to include that language that says, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, that other section is in full force and effect, or something to that effect. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the revisor.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out this new subsection H that the committee is discussing. On page 4, line 39, you'll note at the beginning of this subsection, it says, subject to the provisions of subsection B. And if you flip back to page 3 of the bill, line 29, subsection B, that is provision that directs the county election officer to attempt to contact a person to verify or at least give the voter the opportunity to correct any deficiency in their signature on their advanced voting ballot. So these provisions in subsection H are subject to that opportunity for the county election officer to allow the voter to correct any deficiencies such as a missing signature or a mismatched signature that appears on the advanced voting ballot envelope.
All right, did that answer your question, Representative? Okay, fantastic. Senator Falscado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, if you recall, a few years ago at an election, a canvassing at Cedric County election office with Kelly Arnold and others were there, and we all watched as our election commissioner held up a stack of advanced ballots missing the signature on the outside of the envelope. And so that's when I offered or introduced legislation of what we're talking about now. So in Cedric County, it's working really well. And they actually, Mr. Chairman, they have went out to disabled people's homes to collect their signature that they just forgot to put on the envelope. So, so I know that they're already doing that, trying to contact that voter to get their signature and match signatures. So, and so again, I guess my question is, so since we're already doing this, the piece that we're adding in will do additionally what for the revisor, I guess, just so that I'm clear.
Supervisor?
Mr. Chairman, subsection H basically is a directive that the county election officer is not to accept an advance voting ballot unless the officer can verify that the signature on the envelope of the ballot matches that is in the county office records for that voter. Basically just a directive as to whether or not to accept that advance voting ballot based on the verification of the voter signature.
So for me, it might be mildly duplicative, as you pointed out. However, my goal here is to just, I guess, help the folks who are in the disabled community as much as possible in order to have them vote. So it might be mildly duplicative, but I think it could still be beneficial to that community. So that is the proposal at this time. Would you guys like to conference?
I'd like to clarify before we visit about that. On the penalty for turning in too many ballots is changed from a felony to a Class C or B?
I did say B, but willing to negotiate on that if you guys need.
Okay. Just a moment.
Thank you, Senator. And the Senate's back. All right. Well, and if we need to come back at another point in time, just let us know if you guys have something coming up here at 9 o'clock or not. Okay, we have 9:30 as well, so we'll keep plugging away through that.
But I'd like to have someone answer this question.
Okay.
Was on the penalty for turning in too many ballots, changing from a felony to a Class C misdemeanor is what I had heard. But you had said Class B. Could someone tell us the difference?
Revisor.
I'll have to, you know, Mike, off the top of your head?
Well, a felony obviously is a much more serious crime. A Class B misdemeanor, I think, is, and you're about a level 9 non-person felony. The presumptive sentence would be probation. So the likelihood of anybody spending time in a correctional institution would be probably pretty minimal, but a felony is certainly more serious than a Class B misdemeanor. Class B misdemeanor, if I recall correctly, I think the penalty is up to 6 months in jail and a $250 or $2,500 fine. So
And then what is a Class C misdemeanor?
SC, I believe, is a month up to 30 days in county jail. And I cannot, I don't know if it's five.
It's $500 fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Willing to do a Class C if you guys are. Class B or C, I mean, either or.
We'll take the House's position on that.
Okay, Class B.
B as in boy.
Okay, Class B then.
As far as the other amendment that you raised, we think it's repetitive, but we really don't have a position on that.
Okay. So then are you accepting it then?
We will.
Okay. All right, thank you guys. All right, is there further discussion on House Bill 2183? Chair recognizes Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's long been my practice, and I know many other candidates. In my party, we call it get out the vote, and the majority party, I guess they call it ballot harvesting, but that's a sample, Mr. Chairman, of my effort to inform voters that they're up against a deadline and they need to get their ballot in. If you look at the language in that notice, that typically I don't mail it, typically I post it. I actually mail a notice to them when they're first getting their ballots to explain that they need to get it in on time, they need to make sure they sign it and so forth. And I always offer to assist if they so choose. And if you look on this particular notice, the first option, well, first of all, I tell them they need to get it in. This is actually written on a Sunday, so I'm not telling them to mail it because I know it likely won't get there, or there's a good chance it won't get there when it needs to. So I mentioned to them that it can be hand-delivered to the election office by themselves, and I simply offer, if they so choose, to pick it up and deliver it for them as a matter of convenience. Believe it or not, the fact of the matter is that some of my voters trust me more than they do other people. Consequently, I'm not sure why the prohibition is in here that candidates cannot do the very same thing that their spouse could do, that one of their volunteers could do, that their campaign treasurer could do, that the party chairman could do. The statutes, the crimes that apply to the mishandling of ballots apply to candidates as much as they do anyone else. And I would hope that other candidates are just like me and that they take those criminal provisions very seriously and handle these ballots with the care that they deserve. I would offer, Mr. Chairman, a motion to strike the prohibitions or the distinctions that apply in this bill to candidates over any other person. I don't see any purpose to that. I don't think candidates are more nefarious than anyone else handling ballots. In fact, I happen to think they are much more careful and would be much more careful with handling those ballots. So without that, I would not be able to sign the conference committee report, and I would offer that. I don't know if we do motions or suggestions or how we go about that, but that's my position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That position was one that the Senate took very seriously. I do appreciate Representative Miller bringing this because that's exactly the top portion. 3 days prior to the election, you still have options. You can drop it in the mail. You can deliver it. You can have someone pick it up for you. And you can also take it to the election office yourself. So you have ways to get that ballot to the election office, and I appreciate you putting this on here. The issue with the candidate, I think, is more of perception than it is anything else. At the same time, the candidate probably has more influence than someone picking up the ballot. And so I think that's, we take that very seriously, that the candidate is not there to pick up their ballot, to influence the candidate or the person anyway, on how to mark their ballot, how to help them sign the ballot, and how to pick it up and take it to the ballot box or to the polling place. So we feel like that position is pretty hard in the Senate.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think me personally, I kind of try to reflect back to what happens during election day when someone goes into the election booth to cast their ballot. I do not believe as a candidate I can sit there and help people fill out their ballot or assist them with the process of going through the ballot process. So I think if we are not allowed in that process, that we do trust other people to do that process, that we should not be doing that outside of that arena as well. It's just my personal view.
Representative Miller.
Well, I respect your personal view. I have a different view. It was about 3 o'clock on election day, this last election, that I got a call in response to one of these letters that had my phone number on it. And the lady was, she was lying in a hospital bed that was actually in her house, but she was severely ill, and one of her family members asked if I could assist her. They actually wanted me to pick up a sick and disabled ballot, but in the meantime, she located her ballot. I arrived at her house. There were 7 or 8 family members or friends outside the house, but they asked me to go inside and assist her. She asked me to fill out her ballot per her instructions, which I did. My point is that that lady trusted me more than she did her own family, in that she asked me to do it. And I very much cherish that position, Mr. Chairman. But the truth of the matter is if I'm asked to retrieve a ballot and I arrive at the home with a volunteer who goes up to the door and picks up the ballot instead of me, that would be legal under this bill. But it also would mean that I'm sending a person to the door that the person is unfamiliar with as much as they are me. When they call me, I have a pretty good idea who they're voting for. They wouldn't be calling me, right? But I also know that when I pick the ballot up, it's already marked. It's already in a sealed envelope. There is no influence involved in the casting of that ballot unless the person asks me to assist them. And that happens a lot. I have, in our county, we have nonpartisan election of judges. They don't have party on them. And so I'm often asked by voters who call me, not necessarily at their door, they'll just call me. And they'll walk through the judges and they'll ask my opinion because they trust my opinion. And I'm willing to offer it if I have one. But there's no influence unless that person is asking because they trust me as an elected official to give them advice. But again, maybe a perception, and it may be something others don't practice, but it is important to me to continue to be able to assist voters to the maximum extent that they request that I do it. So again, that's my suggestion. If it doesn't get on there, I've made my position clear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Berquist.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the discussion. I have my own personal experience is that people are intimidated by the position not by the person of the elected official or even the person running for office. And I don't find myself to be intimidating. I'm usually pretty personable, but people will say, I voted for you. What they see you in the grocery store, they say, I voted for you. And it's kind of the thing of not knowing what to say. And so my concern is that I think this is valuable because the person of the candidate is a position that tends to lean somebody in a certain way. And whereas making their personal decision or looking at a list of things that somebody's given them, a list of candidates, is something they can still make an evaluated decision on. And that's why I don't get involved in people's elections, their ballots. Thank you.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really do appreciate this discussion. I appreciate Representative Miller's view and his honesty. He mentioned exactly my personal issue, a candidate filling out someone else's ballot is an issue. That's the issue I have. I cannot do that. If I go to an election poll, I cannot fill someone else's ballot out for them. I should not be able to go somewhere else and fill out an advance ballot. And that just doubles and reassures my personal opinion that candidates should not be assisting ballots.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, I went to my local county clerk's office to ask about what can we do to help the disabled, the people in nursing homes. Since COVID has been there, nobody can come in nursing homes. So how would they vote? And this issue came up, and collecting the ballots was a discussion that we had, not marking the ballots, not signing the ballots for them. But their issue was nobody can help them. No family members can't get in. Now, they could call them, but they can't get in and talk to them. So who is actually helping them is usually the staff. And her concern was the staff was really the voting twice. They're voting for themselves, and they're voting for sometimes the disabled person in that hospital bed. And that was her concern, not mine. How do we solve this problem? It's a difficult problem. But we have to let them they have a right to vote. But that's the concern that she brought up to me. One solution that she brought up for ballot harvesting, if you want to call it that, somebody picking up all the ballots, was putting a secure ballot box in each nursing home. Today, or in the last election, we had the ballot boxes that were sitting out, and you could drop your ballot in this secure box. She suggested putting a ballot box in each nursing home, and as they pick on their route to pick up all these other ballots, they could drop by the nursing homes. In my county, it's 4 or 5 nursing homes. Sedgwick County or Topeka, it's going to be a little bit more. However, they have someone there that does that. If you can, and those boxes, according to the clerk, could be paid for by COVID money. So that's a suggestion that they made. I don't know that it's in this bill. We don't want to put it in this bill, but that's a suggestion to help the disabled, help those in nursing homes, and solve some of this problem. But she was concerned about people voting twice.
Thank you, Senator. I would echo many of the sentiments that have been shared here today by my other Republican colleagues. And if we look at the language now as we've amended it, we are permitting people to turn in 10 ballots. You know, I think that the folks in the nursing homes, there are many who still mail letters. They have stamps. So some will be able to still return their ballots in the mail. But let's say that you have 100 residents in a nursing home. Well, if you have 10 employees there, well, now you have 100 ballots that they're able to turn in for those residents. If you have 20 employees, well, now you have 200. And so way more than you would ever need for those residents at that facility. So from what it sounds like to me, we will have to go ahead and run an agree to disagree on House Bill 2183 if that is agreeable to all parties at this current point in time.
No, I disagree to agree to disagree.
All right. So,
Before we end the
Representative Miller.
if I may, before we end the discussion, I would like to turn our attention, and I appreciate Senator Alley actually triggered this question. I would like some discussion from the senator, since this was not voted on in the House, about this funding section. If first I could just ask a little background on what provoked that, and then I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Halley.
Thank you. My county clerk called me concerning House Bill, or Senate Bill 307, which is still in committee. And so I went down and visited with her. We were trying to, she understood what we voted on, what that was, but she had some suggestions. She wanted to make some suggestions, and that was one of the suggestions that she came up with, was you can put a ballot box, and I do have a picture of the ballot box that she has, but she's getting it, one of it sitting outside the clerk's office today, so people could put other things in it now since elections are over. But as far as, COVID money, these ballot boxes, she said, were around $150. So if you had 5 nursing homes in a county like we do, you're less than $1,000.
Well, I'm sorry. I think that's my fault. I need to hone in on my question. My question relates to the section that was added in the bill by the Senate that makes it a felony for election offices to receive any type of financial support grants for elections. That was not a matter, well, I don't know if that came out of the committee or was added on the floor, but that was not a matter that the House considered. We did have an informal, I think we had an informal hearing, but we never acted on that in committee or on the floor, and I just like some background as to what the purpose of that section is, please. I'm sorry I misled you.
I took it the other way, so we'll go. Thank you. That section that we talked about on the floor was, we heard about some of the multimedia giants providing funding for election offices, funding for Secretary of State's offices during the election, and that was the intent. The amendment that was offered on the floor was to raise, solve the concern that county clerks and county officials that work in the election office also run for office. And so we wanted to make sure that they were protected. They could collect their campaign funds, and so that's the amendment that we put on, was that allowed the county election officer and the county clerks to receive campaign contributions during their election phase.
But the prohibition makes it a felony for election offices to receive any type of financial support grants for election. It limits funding opportunities for underfunded local offices and may be broad unknown implications. Some 2020 grants were used by counties to fund unfunded state mandates for election security, such as audible paper trails or voting machines. Now they will not be able to receive money to assist in the payment of elections. And I think that's a standalone Senate bill.
From outside sources.
From outside sources.
Right.
So I think this comes back to when we had the informational hearing on it in the House, when we had discussed, Facebook's founder, Mr. Zuckerberg, in contributing millions of dollars across America to election offices, that type of a deal. If I recall correctly, that's basically where this is coming from, but also making sure that we don't have any impropriety based on donations from outside third-party sources or perceived impropriety in our elections. And it is, I think, in my opinion, one of the core functions of government that we make sure that our elections are fully funded and that we do not have to rely on the third-party money in order to facilitate our elections.
And that may very well be, and I might very well agree ultimately with that position, but what I don't understand is if the Senate committee didn't even work the bill, why we're including it in a conference report when in fact we've got another year to work that through the regular channels.
If I may, real quick, I think that, a former representative who was up here said that his favorite committee is the committee of the whole, and they did discuss it in committee, and it was approved by the Senate. Senator Alley, if you'd like to add any comments.
Basically what happened, an amendment was offered for that.
Representative Miller.
Thank you.
Are there further questions or concerns at this time for 2183? It looks like we've lost most of the Senate at this current point in time. So, well, maybe we can get you to, make decisions by yourself, right?
I would prefer to have the other members with us.
Okay, so I think at this point, if we could have staff go ahead and start creating the documents for the agree to disagree for both the Senate and House floor, that'd be appreciated. It looks like Representative Miller has some additional comments.
I'm sorry.
Never mind. All right, thank you, and we will coordinate another meeting time after we do those agree to disagrees. Thank you. We are adjourned.